Before we unseal this file and step into the shadows of Buenos Aires, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. We are exposing the operations that history books often omit, the silent wars fought in the margins of diplomacy. Join us as we reveal the machinery of intelligence. Buenos Aires in the spring of 1962 was a city of intoxicating contradictions. It was the Paris of South America, a sprawling metropolis of European architecture, wide boulevards, and a cultural rhythm that pulsed with the tango and the late-night clatter of cafes. The air in November was thick with the scent of blooming jacarandas, their purple flowers carpeting the avenues of Palermo and Recoleta, creating a dreamlike haze that masked the city's darker undercurrents. For the uninitiated, the city was a paradise of beef, wine, and endless opportunity. For the operatives of the Mossad, specifically for a woman known in the files only as Dalia, it was a hunting ground. Dalia sat at a small, wrought-iron table outside the Café Tortoni on Avenida de Mayo. She wore large, dark sunglasses that concealed the constant scanning motion of her eyes. A silk scarf was tied loosely around her neck, protecting her from the breeze that swept in from the Rio de la Plata. To the waiter, who brought her a cortado and a glass of sparkling water, she was Isabella Rossi, a wealthy Italian widow seeking investment opportunities and a reprieve from the memories of a husband lost to a tragic sailing accident in the Mediterranean. Her Spanish was impeccable, accented with the slight melodic lilt of Milan, a detail she had practiced for 6 months until it felt more natural than her native Hebrew. She stirred the coffee slowly, the spoon clinking against the porcelain with a rhythmic precision that matched her heartbeat. She was 32 years old, though her eyes held the weariness of someone who had lived through several lifetimes. Dalia was a Lohamet, a combatant of the Mossad, but her battlefield was not the trenches or the desert sands. Her battlefield was the human heart, the space between a whisper and a touch, the psychological terrain where trust is built and then shattered. Her mission was designated Operation Chimera. It was a directive that had come straight from the highest echelons of the service in Tel Aviv. The target was not a soldier. He was not a man who had pulled triggers or commanded tanks. He was something far worse. He was an architect of systems. In the dark days of Europe, he had been the man who designed the logistics of transportation, the man who calculated the efficiency of space, the man who turned the elimination of human beings into a mathematical equation. His name, in the dossier she had memorized down to the punctuation marks, was Heinrich Vogel. In Buenos Aires, he was known as Ricardo Clement, a quiet, unassuming logistics consultant for a German-Argentine import firm. But Dalia knew him as the architect, the man who ensured that the trains ran on time to the camps, the man who optimized the flow of the innocent toward their end. He is a ghost, her handler, a man named Eitan, had told her in a safe house in Tel Aviv weeks earlier. He does not drink to excess. He does not gamble. He does not visit brothels. He goes to work, he goes to the opera, and he goes home to his villa in San Isidro. He is a man of routine, and that routine is his armor. Dalia took a sip of the bitter coffee. Routine was armor, yes, but routine was also a trap. A man who lived by strict patterns was a man who could be predicted, and a man who lived in hiding, no matter how comfortable, was a man who was fundamentally lonely. That was the crack in the armor she intended to exploit. She wasn't there to kidnap him. The Eichmann operation 2 years prior had changed the landscape. The world was watching, and Argentina was paranoid about Israeli violations of sovereignty. The directive for Vogel was different. It was a red page order, a sanctioned elimination. But it had to be clean. It had to look like a natural end to a quiet life. No international incidents, no diplomatic fallout, just a heart that stopped beating. She checked her watch. It was 4 p.m. Vogel would be leaving his office in the Microcentro in exactly 15 minutes. He would walk 3 blocks to a newsstand, buy a German-language paper, and then catch the 4:30 train to the suburbs. She didn't need to see him today. She had watched this ritual for 2 weeks. Today was about positioning. Tonight, he was attending a gala at the Teatro Colón. That was where Isabella Rossi would make her entrance. The weight of the mission pressed on her. She thought of her own family, the grandparents she never knew, the cousins who vanished into the smoke of the places Vogel had designed. There was no anger in her movements, only a cold, crystalline purpose. Anger was a liability. It made hands shake and voices tremble. She needed to be ice. She needed to be Isabella. She signaled the waiter for the check. As she placed the pesos on the table, she adjusted her scarf. The performance was about to begin. The stage was the glittering high society world of Buenos Aires, and the final act would take place in the silence of a room where a monster felt safe. Dahlia stood up, smoothing her skirt, and walked into the golden afternoon light, leaving her true self behind at the table. Heinrich Vogel, or Ricardo, as his neighbors knew him, was a man who prided himself on his invisibility. He was 55 years old, with thinning silver hair combed meticulously back from a high forehead, and eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses that seemed to observe the world without ever truly participating in it. He lived in San Isidro, an affluent suburb of Buenos Aires, known for its cobbled streets, English-style mansions, and the quiet discretion of its residents. It was a place where people didn't ask questions about the past, primarily because so many of them had pasts they wished to keep buried. Vogel's house was modest compared to the sprawling estates of the cattle barons, but it was fortified with privacy. High hedges shielded the garden from the street. The windows were always draped. He lived alone, having sent his wife and children to live in Chile a year prior, citing the political instability in Argentina, though the truth was he feared the long arm that had snatched Eichmann. He was a man living in a suspended state of anxiety, masked by a demeanor of rigid calm. Inside his home, the chaos of the world was held at bay by obsessive order. His books were alphabetized. His records were cataloged by composer and conductor. He was a lover of classical music, specifically the heavy dramatic swells of Wagner and the precise mathematical beauty of Bach. Music was his refuge. It was the only place where he allowed himself to feel something akin to emotion. On this particular evening, Vogel stood before the mirror in his hallway, adjusting his bow tie. The fabric was silk, black, and perfectly knotted. He stared at his reflection. He did not see a monster. He saw a professional, a man who had done a job when his country asked him to solve a problem. He viewed his past actions not as atrocities, but as logistical challenges that he had overcome with brilliance. He detached the suffering from the spreadsheet. To him, the cargo had been units, not people. Ricardo, he whispered to himself, testing the name on his tongue as he did every morning and every evening. You are Ricardo, a consultant, a lover of the arts. He picked up his ticket for the Teatro Colón, a performance of Tristan und Isolde. It was his favorite. The story of doomed love, of longing, of a bond that transcended the mortal coil. It appealed to his sense of tragedy. He felt himself a tragic figure, a man of intellect forced to live among the uncultured masses of South America, hiding his brilliance, surviving on the scraps of a life that should have been magnificent. He checked the locks on his back door 3 times. He activated the simple alarm system he had rigged himself, a series of tripwires connected to silent indicators. Paranoia was his constant companion. He knew they were out there, the Israelis, the Avengers. He had heard the whispers in the German expatriate community, men disappearing in Brazil, accidents in Paraguay. He knew he was on a list, but he also believed in his own intelligence. He believed he was smarter than them. He believed his cover was impenetrable because he was so wonderfully boring. Vogel stepped out into the cool evening air. His car, a black sedan, was parked in the driveway. He checked the undercarriage for tampering, a habit he had developed over the last decade. Nothing. He got in, the leather seats creaking under his weight. As he drove toward the city, the lights of Buenos Aires began to twinkle like a sea of diamonds. He had no idea that he was not the hunter, but the prey. He did not know that his invisibility had been pierced months ago by a low-level clerk in the import office who had noticed that Senor Ricardo had an uncanny knowledge of European railway timetables from the 1940s. A slip of the tongue during a lunch break discussion about logistics. That information had traveled a long, circuitous route, from the clerk to a local Jewish community leader, to the Israeli embassy, and finally, to a desk in Tel Aviv where a man named Eitan placed a red stamp on a file. Vogel arrived at the theater, handing his keys to the valet. He felt a surge of superiority as he walked up the grand staircase, surrounded by the elite of Argentina. They were wealthy, yes, but he considered them provincial. They wore their jewels and furs with a lack of true refinement. He, however, carried the culture of the old world. He moved to the bar for a pre-show glass of champagne. He stood alone, as he always did, observing the crowd with a detached smirk. And then, the air in the room seemed to shift. Across the lobby, standing near a marble pillar, was a woman. She was wearing a dress of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the light and reflect it back as a soft glow. Her hair was dark, pulled back to reveal the elegant curve of her neck. She was laughing softly at something an older gentleman was saying. But her eyes were scanning the room. Vogel felt a pull he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just lust, though she was undeniably beautiful. It was recognition. She held herself with a poise that screamed, "Old world." She didn't move like the Argentine women. She moved like a European. She moved like someone who understood the weight of history. He watched her. She turned, and for a fraction of a second, her gaze locked with his. She didn't smile. She didn't look away immediately. She held his gaze with a cool appraisal that sent a jolt of electricity down his spine. Then she turned back to her companion, leaving Vogel staring into his champagne, his heart hammering a rhythm that had nothing to do with logistics. The gray ghost had been seen. The transformation into Isabella Rossi was not merely a matter of wardrobe and makeup. It was an internal restructuring of the soul. Dahlia spent the hours before the gala in a meditative state, constructing the memories of a woman who did not exist. She recalled the smell of the fictional lemon trees in her fictional villa in Lombardy. She conjured the face of her dead husband, Paolo, piecing him together from fragments of men she had known in her real life. The kindness of a childhood friend, the jawline of a fellow agent. She needed to love him, and she needed to grieve him so that when she spoke of him, the sorrow in her eyes would be genuine. The Mossad technical team in Buenos Aires, a small unit operating out of the back of a textile shop in the once district, had provided the physical props. The jewelry she wore was real, rented from a sympathetic jeweler in Montevideo to avoid local paper trails. The dress was bespoke, tailored to accentuate her figure while maintaining an air of aristocratic modesty. Her purse contained a compact, a lipstick, a handkerchief, and a pack of cigarettes. It also contained a small, innocuous-looking pill case, but the most important weapon was the dossier on Vogel. Dahlia knew his weaknesses better than he knew them himself. She knew he considered himself an intellectual exile. She knew he despised the crudeness of South America. She knew he was a snob. This was the key. She couldn't approach him as a flirtatious young girl. He would see through that or deem it beneath him. She had to approach him as an equal, as a peer, as a fellow sufferer of the cultural wasteland. He wants to be understood, Aiton had briefed her. Narcissists of his caliber do not want sex as much as they want a mirror. Be his mirror. Reflect his perceived greatness back at him. At the gala, Dahlia played her part flawlessly. Her companion for the evening was a Sayanim, a volunteer helper, an elderly Jewish man posing as a distant uncle who was introducing her to society. He was safe, non-threatening, and served as the perfect anchor. "He is watching you," the old man whispered as they stood near the pillar. He didn't look at Vogel, but he felt the stare. "I know," Dahlia murmured, a smile plastered on her face. "Let him watch. We don't make the move yet. We let the music do the work." They entered the auditorium. The Teatro Colón was magnificent, a cavern of gold and red velvet, its acoustics legendary. Dahlia's seat was strategically chosen. She was in a box to the left of the stage. Vogel was in the stalls, row F, seat 12. From her vantage point, she could see the back of his silver head as the overture of Tristan und Isolde began, the famous Tristan chord rising from the orchestra pit, unresolved, longing, full of tension. Dahlia watched Vogel. She saw his head tilt back slightly. She saw his hand grip the armrest. He was enraptured. During the intermission, the crowd spilled out into the Golden Hall. This was the moment. Dahlia sent her uncle to get drinks, leaving her standing alone, examining a bust of Beethoven. She stood in a way that invited approach but commanded respect. Vogel circled her. He was cautious. He walked past her once, then turned back, pretending to examine the architecture of the ceiling. Finally, unable to resist the gravitational pull of a fellow European in this sea of strangers, he stepped closer. "The acoustics are passable," he said, speaking in Spanish but with a thick, deliberate German accent. "But the brass section lacks the discipline of Berlin." Dahlia turned slowly. She didn't smile immediately. She studied him, letting her eyes travel over his face, making him feel seen. "Berlin," she said, switching immediately to German. Her accent was Italian-tinged, but fluent. "I haven't heard the Philharmonic in Berlin since 1938. My husband, he preferred the warmth of La Scala, but I always found the Germans understood the tragedy of the music better." Vogel's eyes widened behind his glasses. A woman who spoke German, a woman who knew the pre-war era, a woman who spoke of tragedy with such casual elegance. "You are from Europe?" he asked, stepping a fraction closer. "Milan," she lied smoothly. "But my heart has always wandered. I am Isabella Rossi." She extended a gloved hand. He took it. His skin was dry, cool. Dahlia felt a wave of revulsion so strong it nearly made her nauseous, but her training clamped down on the physical reaction. She felt the hand of the man who had signed the transport orders for thousands of children. She didn't squeeze. She let her hand rest in his, limp and aristocratic. "Ricardo Clement," he said, "a humble consultant, but a lover of Wagner. Wagner demands a certain fortitude of spirit," Dahlia said, withdrawing her hand. "Most people here," she gestured vaguely at the Argentine crowd, "they come for the social event. They do not hear the philosophy in the notes." Vogel looked as if he had been struck by lightning. She had spoken his internal monologue aloud. "Exactly," he breathed. "They hear noise. We hear the architecture of the sublime." "Architecture?" Dahlia repeated the word, watching his pupils dilate. "An interesting choice of words, Herr Clement. Are you an architect?" "In a manner of speaking," he said, a shadow of arrogance crossing his face. "I organize things. I build systems, or I used to." "We all used to be something else," Dahlia said, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "before the world changed. Now we are just visitors in a strange land." The bell rang, signaling the end of the intermission. Vogel looked genuinely disappointed. "The second act is the most difficult," he said. "Perhaps, if you are not otherwise engaged, we could discuss the performance afterward? There is a quiet cafe nearby." The hook was baited. Dahlia smiled, a sad, mysterious smile that promised understanding. "My uncle is tired. I will have to take him home," she said. "But I do enjoy a walk in the botanical gardens on Tuesdays. It reminds me of the gardens in Lombardy." She didn't wait for his answer. She turned and walked back toward her box, feeling his eyes burning into her back. She had given him a time and a place. She had taken the control away from him. Now he would spend the next 3 days thinking about her, obsessing over the mysterious Italian woman who understood the architecture of the sublime. Tuesday arrived with a heavy, humid heat that clung to the skin. The botanical gardens in Palermo were a lush labyrinth of green, a sanctuary of silence within the city. Dahlia sat on a bench near the greenhouse, reading a book of poetry. She wore a light linen dress and a wide-brimmed hat. She looked like a painting. She had arrived an hour early to sweep the area. Her support team had identified 3 potential exit routes and checked for any surveillance that Vogel might have brought with him. But Vogel was arrogant. He came alone. He approached her with a bouquet of flowers, not roses, which would be too forward, but white lilies. Tasteful. Funeral flowers, Dahlia thought grimly. "Frau Rossi," he said, bowing slightly. "Herr Clement," she replied, closing the book. "I wasn't sure you would come." "A gentleman does not ignore an invitation from a lady of culture," he said, sitting on the opposite end of the bench. He maintained a respectful distance. He was playing the part of the courtly suitor. For the next hour, they talked. Or rather, Dahlia listened. She guided the conversation with the skill of a therapist. She asked open-ended questions that allowed him to complain about the inefficiency of the Argentine government, the laziness of the local workers, the lack of punctuality. "Order," he said, his voice gaining intensity. "Civilization is built on order. Without logistics, without a schedule, society collapses into chaos. That is what happened. Before." "Before?" Dahlia probed gently. "In Europe," he said quickly, correcting himself. "During the war, chaos. We tried to bring order to a chaotic world. But the world prefers the mess." "My husband was a man of order," Dahlia lied, weaving her legend into his narrative. "He was an engineer. He believed that everything could be fixed if you just applied the right pressure." "He sounds like a wise man," Vogel said. "It is a burden, isn't it? To see the solution when everyone else only sees the problem. A terrible burden." Dahlia agreed. She turned to face him, her eyes searching his. "You carry a burden, Ricardo. I can see it in your shoulders. You are a man who has done great things, and yet you must hide them." Vogel stiffened. It was a risky gambit. If she pushed too hard, his paranoia would kick in. But if she didn't push enough, they would stay in the realm of polite acquaintances. "We all have our histories," he said stiffly. "I didn't mean to pry," Dahlia said, retreating instantly. She looked down at her hands. "It's just, sometimes I feel so invisible here. No one knows who I really am. No one knows what I lost. When I saw you at the theater, I thought, maybe he is invisible too." Vogel relaxed. She had made it about her vulnerability, not his. "Invisibility is safe," he said softly. "But yes, it is lonely." "I have a villa," Dahlia said. "Not a real villa, just a house I rent in Belgrano. But I have a cook who makes a strudel that is acceptable. Not Berlin standard, but acceptable. Perhaps you would honor me with dinner on Friday?" Vogel hesitated. Going to a private home was a breach of his security protocol, but the allure was overpowering. A German-speaking Italian widow, wealthy, discreet, who understood his worldview and offered him strudel. It was a fantasy he couldn't deny. "I would be delighted," he said. As Dahlia walked away that afternoon, she felt a tremble in her hands. It wasn't fear. It was the adrenaline of the hunt. He was moving out of the public space. He was coming into her territory. The trap was set. The house in Belgrano was a stage set. The Mossad team had rented it a month prior. Every item in the room had been curated. The books on the shelves were German and Italian classics. The photos on the mantel were aged and framed. Dahlia with a fictional husband. Dahlia on a ski trip in the Alps. Microphones were hidden in the molding of the ceiling and behind the painting of the Swiss landscape. The support team was in a van parked 2 streets away, listening. Dahlia was alone in the house. The cook had prepared the meal and left, or so the story went. In reality, the food had been brought in. Vogel arrived at 7 p.m. sharp. He brought a bottle of Riesling. He seemed more relaxed than before, his guard lowered by the promise of intimacy. Dahlia poured the wine. The lighting was low. Wagner played softly on the phonograph. "To the invisible," Dahlia toasted. "To those who understand," Vogel replied, clinking his glass against hers. The dinner was a masterclass in manipulation. Dahlia fed his ego. She asked him about his work as a consultant, and he spoke about shipping routes and cargo capacities with a passion that was disturbing. He spoke of efficiency and cleansing the bottlenecks of industry. Dahlia knew he wasn't talking about grain shipments. He was talking about the methodology of genocide, using corporate euphemisms. "You must have been very valuable to your employers in Germany," she said, cutting a piece of veal. "I was," Vogel said, his chest swelling. "I was indispensable. There were problems, logistical nightmares, moving thousands of units across a continent in the middle of a war, fuel shortages, bombings, and yet I delivered. I always delivered. And they didn't appreciate you? They turned on us," Vogel spat, his face reddening. "The politicians, the weak ones, they didn't have the stomach for what was necessary. When the end came, they ran. They blamed the men who actually did the work. I was a technician of the state. I solved the problems they created." Dahlia felt the cold fury rising in her chest. Technician, units. He was talking about her people, about the children who were suffocated in darkness. She took a sip of wine to wash away the taste of bile. "It is unjust," she said softly, "to be punished for competence." Vogel looked at her with gratitude that bordered on adoration. "You are a rare woman, Isabella. Most women, they are sentimental. They cry over unavoidable realities. You have a strength." He reached across the table and placed his hand on hers. This time, Dahlia didn't pull away. She turned her hand over and interlaced her fingers with his. "I learned strength from necessity," she said. "My husband, he worked for the government too, in Italy. He had to make hard choices. I stood by him." "Did you?" Vogel asked, his eyes searching hers for any sign of deception. "Until the end," she lied. "Loyalty is everything, Ricardo." Vogel squeezed her hand. "I have not been with a woman in a long time," he admitted. "My wife, she is in Chile. She does not understand the pressure I am under. She just wants to be safe. She doesn't understand that a man like me, I need to be stimulated." He stood up and moved around the table. Dahlia remained seated. He stood behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. He leaned down, smelling the perfume at her neck. "You smell like memory," he whispered. Dahlia closed her eyes. This was the most dangerous moment. If she rejected him, she lost him. If she accepted him, she had to maintain the charade while being touched by a monster. She stood up and turned to face him. She placed a hand on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Not yet," she whispered. "I am a traditional woman, Ricardo. We must not rush. Anticipation is also a form of logistics, is it not?" Vogel laughed, a dry barking sound. "You play with me, Isabella." "I am serious," she said. "I want to know you, the real you, not just the consultant. I want to know the architect." Vogel froze. The word hung in the air. "Why do you call me that?" he asked, his voice dropping an octave. "Because," Dahlia said, looking him dead in the eye, "only an architect could build a wall so high around himself. I want to see what is behind the wall." Vogel stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he smiled. "Patience," he said. "You are right. Patience yields the best results." He kissed her hand and stepped back. "Next time," he said. "Next time, I will show you the garden." The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of advance and retreat. Vogel became obsessed. He called Dahlia daily from payphones. He sent her letters, unsigned, filled with philosophical ramblings about the superiority of the European mind. He was falling in love, or at least falling in love with the reflection of himself he saw in her. But Dahlia needed more than infatuation. She needed him to be vulnerable. She needed him to invite her into his sanctuary, the villa in San Isidro. That was where the operation would end. The opportunity came in the form of a feigned crisis. Dahlia called him on a Thursday evening, sounding frantic. "Ricardo, please, I don't know who to turn to." She sobbed into the receiver. "There was a man outside my house, watching. I think it might be someone looking for my husband's old associates. I am afraid." Vogel's protective instincts, fueled by his own paranoia, kicked in immediately. "Stay inside," he ordered. "Lock the doors. Do not call the police. The police are incompetent and corrupt. I will come for you." "No," she said. "I cannot stay here. Please. Can I come to you? Just for a few hours? Until I feel safe?" There was a silence on the line. Bringing her to San Isidro was the ultimate breach of his protocol. But the thought of her being taken, or worse, interrogated by someone who might trace connections back to the old networks, was a risk he couldn't take. And beneath the fear, there was desire. He wanted her in his home. "Come," he said. "Take a taxi to the station in San Isidro. Do not have the driver come to the house. I will pick you up at the station." Dahlia hung up the phone. She wiped the fake tears from her face. Her expression was granite. "He bit," she said to the empty room. She packed a small overnight bag. Inside the lining, she concealed a syringe and a small vial of a potent, fast-acting neurotoxin developed in the labs of Ness Ziona. It mimicked a massive myocardial infarction, a heart attack. No autopsy would find it unless they knew exactly what to look for, and in Argentina, money usually prevented detailed autopsies. She also packed a small, silenced Beretta, just in case. She met Vogel at the train station. It was raining, a heavy tropical downpour that turned the streets into rivers. Vogel's car was waiting. He opened the door for her, his face pale with concern. "Did anyone follow you?" he asked. "I don't think so," she said, trembling. "A performance. I was so careful." He drove in silence, taking a circuitous route to ensure they were clean. Finally, they pulled into the driveway behind the high hedges. The villa was dark, looming in the rain. "Welcome to my fortress," Vogel said. Inside, the house smelled of old paper and wax. It was impeccably clean, almost sterile. He led her to the living room and poured her a brandy. "You are safe here," he said. "No one knows this place exists except the people who need to know." Dahlia took the brandy. She looked around the room. She saw the framed photos of his children, innocent faces smiling from a beach in Chile. She looked away. "You have a beautiful home," she said. "It is extremely orderly." "It is my sanctuary," Vogel said. He sat down opposite her, watching her drink. "Isabella, if there are people looking for your husband's associates, we must be very careful." Who was he? Really? This was the test. Dahlia took a deep breath. "He was a facilitator," she said. "He moved gold for the party in Italy." Vogel exhaled, a long, ragged sound. Gold. That made sense. That fit the narrative. It wasn't war crimes, it was finance. He could respect that. "Then we are kindred spirits," he said. "Facilitators. We make the world work, and they hunt us for it." He stood up and extended his hand. "Come, you are tired. I have a guest room. But perhaps we do not need the guest room tonight?" The question hung in the dank air. Dahlia looked at the man who had orchestrated the death of millions, standing there in his cardigan, asking for comfort. "Show me," she said softly. "Show me who you really are, Ricardo." He led her down the hallway to his bedroom. The walls were lined with books. On his desk, Dahlia noticed a set of blueprints. She glanced at them as they passed. They weren't blueprints for a house. They were old. They were diagrams of rail yards. He kept them as souvenirs, trophies. A cold rage, sharper than any knife, pierced Dahlia's chest. He kept the plans. He was proud of them. They entered the bedroom. Vogel turned to her, reaching for the zipper of her dress. "Tonight," he whispered, "the walls come down." Dahlia smiled. It was the smile of the angel of death. "Yes," she said. "Tonight, everything ends."